Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Analytics Tableau User Group. Let me share my screen. I'm very long to share my screen, so don't, please bear with me. So I think that you could see it. We already start. Today we are the 15th of May, and it's the Analytics Tableau User Group for May. So what is the Analytics Tableau User Group? Is kind of very special because we want to really focus on analytics, how to do analytics in Tableau. So we have a virtual event every month, and we are like speaking about how to do analytics using Tableau Desktop, WebEdic, SData, anything but analytic all the time. So, and from time to time, we have a Tableau team that will give us like some feature about what's the new feature that we have on the product, and it's the case today. But that I will let Chimdi introduce our awesome speaker that we have. Here is like just the link if you want to subscribe to the Analytics User Group so you don't miss any of our email. With the new event that we have, or with the link with the recording. I will share after in the chat, obviously, or this page, also like our YouTube channel if you want to see our past videos. So we are 3 leaders. So my name is Annabelle Lincoln. I'm leading the Tableau Center of Enablement at Fontobel. It's a Swiss bank. I'm in Switzerland. We also be joined by Prem, who is a product engineer for American Express. He's joining our session when he's US APAC friendly. And we have Chimdi, that he's a database manager at Post Media Network. So we have like 3 leaders coming from 3 different regions in the world, and we are trying to to propose you like sessions that are like for different time zones. Yes, some word about me. You already probably not me. I already introduced myself. Just like to tell you that thank you very much for having voted me like a Tableau ambassador and Tableau visionary. It's something that I'm very proud and I feel very honored to be. I'm also co-leading a Data Plus Women initiative, which is also virtual. If you want to join our event, it will be a pleasure. We have only female speakers, but men are welcome to join. We have Prasen, who is sleeping now, hopefully for him. He's a Tableau visionary and Tableau social ambassador. And he will be joining as a session next month. Next month, don't miss it, either like a live or virtually, because it's a very, very good session too. And Chimdi, a little bit more about him. He started using Tableau in 2020, sorry. And oh my God, what he's doing in his Tableau profile, you absolutely is a real artist. You really, really have to go on his profile and see what he's doing. He's also a Tableau ambassador and Tableau visionary. And yes, what is his fun fight? Yes, exactly. I mean, you really have to go and check his Tableau public profile. So the ground rule for today, don't worry, everything is being recorded. Then you can find it on our own YouTube channel. And we will send an email afterwards to everyone who register with the link, obviously, and the different link of the panelists. So maybe a workbook or like a blog post or anything that the panelists will be giving us today. If you have any question, please use the Q&A and not the chat session, because it's easier for us to track and ask the question afterwards. So that's it. So now I will hand over to Chimdi. Chimdi, do you want to share your screen or do you want me to click? As you wish. Chimdi, I cannot hear you.
So I think you can share, Annabelle. I'll just go with
okay, that's fine. Sorry.
I was on mute there. Okay. So for today, for our first talk, we've got 2 amazing speakers who we're really grateful for bringing us some of the action from TC. So for those of us who are not there in person, they're basically just bringing their talk to this analytics tug. So it should be awesome. So the first of the pair is Samuel Parsons, who we all know. Samuel is a group analytics cloud lead and a senior consultant at BizStory, and he's also a Tableau visionary. Now, for those of us who don't know, he actually was the runner-up in 2021 Iron Viz. So again, very talented guy here. His background is in product design and finance analytics, but he's got a passion for data viz design, which evident from his work. And he's always exploring what's considered good design, good data design. That way, he can encourage people, to kind of get involved with Tableau. He's passionate about delivering exquisite and innovative solutions to customers. And if you go to Sam's profile, you can see a bunch of his experiments there. We learn a lot from him. And he's recently started up a YouTube channel where he's actually now breaking down some of the hows and whys of what he's doing. So for those who haven't checked that out, I've actually looked at it. You need to be subscribed to that. He's done a lot of great stuff, and finally you can get to learn from him. So in his spare time, Sam loves to get creative. He's got 3 children. Goes on walks with them, and he likes to train his Saint Berdoodle dog called Shakespeare. I don't think his dog can speak, but I'm sure his dog is very poetic in nature. And the presentation which they're going to be giving us today is interactive business dashboards, the how and the why. And so, I think this is really one of those valuable talks because at the core of Tableau, what do? We build dashboards for clients mainly. And so for those of you who want to learn how to level up, this is a talk that we need to do. I'm going to quickly introduce the second speaker who is also part of this talk. So for the second speaker today, we have Simon, who again, another familiar face in the community. Simon is passionate about data and people, and he leads a vibrant and energized BI team at JLL. JLL is one of these places where they're literally just full of so much talent. Like they're literally collecting database superstars like Thanos rings. So lots of amazing things going on there. He's a proud visionary and ambassador, and Simon strives to help people maximize their potential through data. He's an avid sports lover, and of course, he's also the co-lead of the Sports Biz Sunday initiative on Twitter. So for those of you who are into sports, definitely that's something you should check out. Lots of amazingly, beautifully done analyses and aesthetically pleasing visualizations, all revolving around sports. Away from work, Simon is a husband to his wife, Amanda, and he's got a kid called Ollie. And in addition to his love for sports, he also loves food and traveling. And so again, here's the second half of the presentation, which we're gonna see now, interactive business dashboards, the how and the why. So over to you, Simon and Samuel. And everyone, please remember to use the Q&A for your questions. You put it in the chat, is likely gonna go by too quickly and it gets skipped. So please use the Q&A. Thank you. And I'm gonna keep quiet now.
Thank you, Chimdi. So welcome everyone to our talk on interactive dashboards. Unfortunately, we're not at Tableau Conference today, but that does probably mean you've all got far more sleep and far more energy. So at least you'll be able to survive to the end of the talk without needing some water. So Sam and I are going to do a repeat of the talk that we did at TC. And as such, and because Francois is here as Tableau CTO for EMEA, we will talk about the forward-looking statement. But thankfully, you don't have to read it. We're not at TC, but every time you are at TC, we just have to mention the fact that talks may feature stuff that is not yet released, and Tableau asked us to. But for now, we'll skip over that. So Chimdi did a fantastic job, and thank you so much for the kind introductions. So I won't introduce Sam because you've already known Sam, but I just wanted to say thank you for Sam for allowing me to speak with him last year. It was one of the greatest honours that I've had at TC. Sam does all of the mic drop moments during our talk, so anything that's clever, anything that's innovative, just basically say it's Sam's work. But Sam, thank you for all you do for the community.
Kind. Yeah, unscripted then. I was going to introduce Simon, but I guess I won't, as Chimdi has delivered a pretty comprehensive version of an introduction for him. One thing I will say, though, is do check out Simon's Tableau public profile, especially if you're interested in sports visualization, because that's where Simon really sort of excels with his the stuff he has the most fun with. He co-leads that Sports Viz Sunday project, and Yeah, he's got a real eclectic sort of mix of data visualizations, all focused around sport on his public profile. And Simon, it's always an honor to talk with you. And yeah, let's get into it. So today is a follow-on talk from last year's presentation at TC last year, which was called The Beautiful Business Dashboards and the How and the Why. But don't worry if you haven't seen that talk. It is not critical to this one. You can always catch that on YouTube. Again, it was recorded for the Analytics Tug last year, so it is there available if you want to catch up on that at your own leisure. But what we're doing and why it's a follow-on is it's basically following a similar sort of format. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what we mean by interactivity within dashboards, why you might want to include interactivity in your own dashboards and what the difference that will make and the benefits to all of your users. And then the difference to last year is when we move into a how section, it's going to be less of a live build that we did last year and more of interactive quick-fire tips, but also some real sort of advanced stuff. So Simon and I always like to try and pitch these talks to all users of varying skill and ability. So there will be tips there for everybody. Even if you find that some of the early tips are a little bit for you, hold on to the end because I'm pretty sure there'll be some stuff at the end that you might not have seen before.
So before we start, just as Tableau do, we see and help people understand data. Let's see and help people understand interactivity. So before we dive into any technical stuff, let's just explore what we mean by an interactive dashboard. So I start with the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of interactivity. And that is the process of two people or two things working together and influencing each other. Now, why did Sam and I choose that as the way to introduce interactivity? Because fundamentally, when you're interacting with a dashboard, you are trying to influence your data to be able to find personalized insights. And we really wanted to stress that emphasis on you or your users are influencing your data when you're interacting with it. And that's something that is core to us throughout all of this presentation. So what is interactivity in a dashboard? Interactivity for us is when a user-driven action that can generate additional insights. You are clicking something, you are engaging with your data to add something to it. Now, when we say adding something to it, you could consider it to be like an onion. And if Sam clicks on the next slide, thank you very much, Mr. Parsons. Interactivity is a mechanism to explore your data and your drivers further. So we use the option of an onion here, or the analogy of an onion, because what we're doing is we're constantly putting back different layers of your data. So you might start with a band, or you might start with a headline bar chart, and you always want to say, what next? What do I need to find out? But actually, you may not want to show that all on screen at the start. And interactivity allows your users to have that ability to engage with their data and explore it further without needing it all on screen.
Okay, we also like to and talk through what we're not going to cover and also activity to be. To start with, really we shouldn't get lazy when applying interactivity to our dashboards. We don't want to put interactivity to could somebody just mute their mic? Sorry, you're being quite noisy. Sorry. Interactivity, we don't want to apply it to everything and everywhere. We want to apply it with focus. Being lazy is applying it by default and putting it onto every chart on our dashboards. We want to really give the users the focus to unpeel that onion and dive further into their data. Use interactivity as a means of showing off our abilities with Tableau itself. We don't want, it's not there to try and be flashy with. It is more about trying to really focus in on the data that we're showing off, not showing off
particularly annoying for end users if you put in lots of interactivity on all of the elements on your dashboard.
Things like hover actions that will fire when the users are not expecting them to happen. It can be particularly annoying. So try and tone it back. Less is more. Lastly, we're not going to be talking about animation in terms of interactivity, because animation for us is not interactivity. It is more a storytelling feature. It is something that is the result of an interactive action. So we're not going to be talking around the animation feature in Tableau today. Simon, why?
So ultimately, interactivity has to deliver some benefit. And the good news is it can do, and it can deliver multiple benefits. The benefits can be from your design choices. Now, Chimdi, I will admit, you're probably one of the most people that I admire the most from your design choices on Tableau Public. And often that's because of the fact that the clarity in your design, the data to ink ratios are absolutely spot on. And when I think about interactivity, I think about it can help that, because it means you don't need everything on screen at one point in time. You can guide people through your data by allowing them to interact with it and exploring it further. But beyond just the design, think about some of the factors that play when you've got a successful data culture. If you've got a successful data culture and you've got people that are data fluent or data literate in your organization, they will often have a core common value, and that will be one of curiosity. If you give people prescriptive dashboards that say this is all you're going to be able to find in it, the likelihood is that's a closed conversation. Just when you're engaging with people and you ask people questions, when you ask people questions, you have an open conversation, you get engagement back. When you ask questions of your data, you get an open conversation with your data. You are encouraging people to explore it and encouraging that culture or that value of curiosity. And if you do that, ultimately, you are helping to democratize your users' journeys. So you are empowering them to be in control of how they are exploring the dashboard and how they are engaging it. And the minute you empower someone is the minute they feel in control. And by being in control, it often leads to increased adoption. And all of that can be achieved through interactivity. So, a picture can paint 1,000 words. We think that was said by Arthur Brisbane in 1911, but if anyone would like to correct us, feel free to do so, because that was just the extent of our ability to search Wikipedia. But the reason that we share that is actually we would put a slight different lens on that for interactivity. So whilst Arthur may have said a picture can paint 1,000 words, we believe interactivity can help uncover 1,000 data insights. It allows people to uncover far more than what they might first perceive to be available within their data. And I don't think anyone's ever said that before, so we're going to tag that and say it was our quote. But likewise, anyone could say it. It's not a problem.
Brilliant. Okay, so now that concludes like the theory side of the session. We're now going to move into the how. So to start off with, we're going to go through some quick fire tips for all levels. These tips are going to go through pretty quickly. We're not going to labor them. We're going to move through them sort of a minute or 2 minutes at a time. So I'm going to just pop out of the presentation mode because we're going to go into Tableau properly now. If my cursor will let me move. Oh, it's gone. Oh, there you go. You can see my background. Right.
Shameless self-promotion there.
That was not planned, I promise. Okay.
So first up, I'm going to talk through, and Sam's going to hopefully click the right buttons this time. But first off, we're going to talk about customized sorting. So Tableau's got a built-in sort button. So you'll see there on subcategory, if Sam can just zoom in or show it, you've got the little hierarchy or the descending bars. That's a very quick way of sorting your subcategories, descending, ascending, or by alphabetical order. So you simply click on the icon to change it. But you can actually do far more. And there's a little drop-down arrow there. Now we're going to demonstrate how you can use that. So Sam, if you could pop into columns, maybe an additional measure, so sum of profit. Thank you. What you can now do is you can drop down the arrow. In addition to sorting alphabetical, descending and ascending by a single measure, you can actually sort it by a field. So if you wanted to sort these by profit, you can do so, and you'll see there you're allowing the option for the users to choose how they sort their data. Do you want to sort it by sales, or do you want to sort it by profit? And it's just core functionality that Tableau has, but functionality that many people, I think, forget when they're demonstrating dashboards to their end users. Now, that's fantastic, but sometimes we might want to provide a more curated story to users. And I'll never forget my first, I think it was my second viz of the day. It was about the need for winter sports speed. And I very carefully created the viz and said, this is the story I want to tell. So I sorted the dashboard in a particular way. I published it to Tableau Public, it went up on Twitter, and someone responded to it with, your dashboard is broken. I clicked this button and all of a sudden all the annotations were in completely the wrong order. They had actually clicked the sort option to change the sort of my chart. Now, I wish I'd have known at the time, because I was only probably 6 months into Tableau. If I had gone worksheet at the top, which hopefully Sam will do for us, you can actually untick the show sort controls. And all that means is the little sort icon that disappears, and it means users cannot provide custom sorts. And again, just when you're designing your dashboards, think about those subtle things of how you want your users to interact with it. And if you don't want them to interact with it, don't be lazy, remove the option so you don't give them the choice and you don't create that confusion.
Okay, maps. Maps are great. Maps are fun. They're really interesting because they put your data into a real world sort of context. But also maps cause a number of issues, and it's all around being constrained to the geography of the world. If we were to look at, say, Europe here at the moment, you can see how densely packed all of the data points are because we have so many cities within Europe. But within Tableau, we have the ability to give our users some more controls over how they deal with maps. So you can go up to Map at the top on your worksheet and into Map Options. And within here, we have a number of options that we can turn on, particularly the toolbar. And if we turn on the toolbar and allow pan and zoom, we get a toolbar that you might well be familiar with, such as this. This allows us to drive into those maps and zoom into the data points as we want to. So we've got the plus and minus buttons to zoom in or zoom out. We can pan around the map using the pan feature, or we can make a selection and say, let's really zone in on Europe here. And as we do so, the data marks are all starting to spread out, making them a lot more readable. Within this toolbar, you can also make selections, whether it's a rectangular selection or even something more custom to deal with difficult shapes within within your geography. So this is a really nice little feature to add if you are expecting or intending your end users to dive into those maps to find certain insights. Now, sticking with maps, there might be a case where you really want to control what they're seeing, very similar into the way that Simon with his sorting took away the sorting options. You can also do that within the maps option here. You can take away the ability to pan and zoom around the map. So you keep the map framed exactly as you want to see it. You can still make your selections. They appear in this toolbar. But maybe, for instance, you need to dive into this map, but it has been locked down. For instance, at TC, we asked people, could they tell us where Belgium is on this map? Pretty much the whole of the audience couldn't say where Belgium was on a map. But luckily, we have a feature that is very often missed within Tableau, within the maps, and this little search icon up here. It is a very powerful search icon. So if I type in Belgium, even though I have the map locked down, so I can't zoom or I can't pan around, I can do a search and it will know where I'm searching to, and it can zoom into where I've looked or where I've asked to look. But notice that this is not a filter option. We are not filtering out any of the data marks that are coming from the UK over here, or France, or even Germany. It is just purely a zoom into the map. And we can always reset that by taking that away. The next quickfire tip is zooming in on your charts. So dense data and visualizing dense data is a really tricky thing that we all have to deal with at times within our work life. Quite often we'll come up with a solution like this, which is called jittering your data. And that
dense data marks across an axis, just at a randomly sort of selected
position. And what that does is that break those data marks so you can see individual marks. All well and good, but it actually has an issue with it, in the fact that you actually lose the form of the data. If I were to take the random function off of the rows here, that random function is what is jittering those marks on the vertical axis. If I take that away, the true form of that data, now you can clearly see where there are clumps of cities that are showing here, and the gaps that are appearing between them. You would have missed that sort of visual sort of representation of the data with the jittering. So taking that random away is kind of helpful to help you see the form of the data, so you can see the outliers a little easier, or clumps of cities. But we've still got that issue of diving in and really seeing individual data marks. This is where a chart zoom will come in handy. If you were to right click on the map area, you can click on Show View Toolbar at the bottom. And when you do that, you get the same toolbar that you saw in the maps before, with the same options. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can make a selection to zoom into a particular area. So if, for example, I see something a bit particularly interesting, I can see two outliers over here, Berlin and Paris. Maybe I want to understand how many cities have I got in here. I can zoom in on those and make a selection, and I can see I've got 4 cities. Notice again, this is a zoom, so my axes have to the area that I've zoomed to, and they're not showing the full set of the full axes essentially. Again, it's not filtering, it is just zooming, but it's a feature that might be useful to diving in and understanding your data.
Now, again, similar to what I started with in terms of sort, hierarchies are default out-the-box functionality that Tableau allows us to do. So you'll see on the field list on the left-hand side, your product value has got a tree against it, a little tree symbol. That means it's a hierarchy. What a hierarchy means is you are defining this dimension belongs to or has a relationship. So you go product name, belongs to manufacturer, belongs to subcategory, belongs to category. All of that belongs within a product hierarchy. Now, when you define a hierarchy in Tableau and you drop that hierarchy in, it means you can click a plus or a minus button to be able to drill that through your data. So you'll see here we've chosen category, which is part of the product hierarchy. That means you can click the plus button and you can go from category to subcategory through to manufacturer. Can go through further if you wanted to, but you can also then subtract it to minus it to be able to hide. Now, don't get me wrong, that's Tableau out-the-box functionality. There are nicer visual ways of doing that. And for those of you that followed Hesham and Lindsay at IronViz a few years ago, they've done some amazing techniques for interactivity around using set actions and plus and minus buttons to be able to do that. But if you just want something quick out the box, Tableau allows you to do it. And obviously you can easily create a hierarchy by just selecting 2 fields. And then once you've got those fields selected, just right click and be able to do that. And you can go down to the bottom and you can go hierarchy, and you can either add to an existing hierarchy or you can create your own hierarchy. Now, there's also interactivity. Think about filters. Filters, you are interacting with data because you are choosing what you want that data to show. But we also wanted to just demonstrate some best practice when it came to filters. So if you've got a filter that is a multi-value select, so we're just going to show the filter there that is state province. You'll see it's a multi-value list. If Sam unticks values here, you'll see the data changes. Now, whilst that can be quite cool, I would suggest that's probably not beneficial from a performance point of view, unfortunately, when you're viewing that on server, and it can be quite distracting for your end user. So what we probably want to do is make that a multi-value drop-down, because we don't need to see every value. That's going to save size and real estate on your dashboard. It's going to make it a drop-down, and you still got, though, that issue of you select values and it updates the chart. So actually what we'd encourage you to do is also use the apply button. The apply button, if I had one wish for Tableau, would be to allow us to actually default that to be on all the time. But we can't, so we have to remember to do it. But by adding the apply button, you are saying to users, make your selection, then click apply, and then the dashboard update. Just a slicker way of doing it, and it also helps with performance. Now, similarly that's multi-value drop-downs. You've also got something you can do for single value drop-downs. Now you'll notice here we've got segment showing on the top right-hand corner in terms of a filter. Segment has only got 2 available options, corporate or home office. Now what that means when you really think about it and put yourself in your end user's point of view is you can only ever have corporate, or you can have home office, or you can have both. Now why am I saying the obvious? That's because actually it doesn't need to be a multi-select drop-down. This instance, it can be a single select drop-down because all you can ever do is select a single value. So I would encourage you to think about what's the construct of your data and do you need multiple values? But also on here, I've selected single here and Sam's brilliantly demonstrated it. But actually in reality, you also want to be able to select both. So don't ever forget, you've also got the customize, show all value to still be able to demonstrate that ability to select everything or select a single value.
Pages. The pages shelf. If you look up here in the top left-hand corner, you can see we've got a little shelf up here that goes very unutilized. Quite often, I think we don't use it as much as we probably should do, or we don't really get the value out of it that we probably should. I know that Simon has a couple of reports at JLL that utilizes this pages shelf, and they are very successful reports. Now, what the pages shelf does is it allows you to drag a dimension onto the shelf, and then you can cycle through that dimension. Filtering, but the added advantage of using the pages shelf is it gives you the history and the trail of what you are cycling through. So it really helps to bring those time series data to life. So things like your order date that we've got on here. Now, as an analyst, quite often you might want to cycle through your data to understand what is happening across time. And this really helps us do that. So if we were to look at this scatter plot that we're looking at here, we can see that the vertical axis is the profit change over time, over year on year, and the sales change over time, year on year. Ideally, as a company, we want to see our data marks appearing in this top right-hand quadrant, the white section here. The pages shelf, when you place a dimension onto it, you get a new control down here that we can see here. And this control gives you a number of different options to play around with to visualize that data. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cycle through the dates. And as I cycle through them individually, manually, you can see there's a trail appearing. This is something that you wouldn't get if you were trying to cycle through using a parameter or a filter in a standard way. The added advantage of this is that we can see what's happening with our data as we cycle through the months and we're looking year on year. How are we performing? Where have we come from? And we can see that we started off going quite nicely into that white quadrant, and now we're sort of tailing off away. As you're doing this, as you're cycling through, you could be firing other visualizations to update within your dashboard at the same time. And now we can see that we've fallen away outside of what the area that we want to be. It's just a really cool little feature that doesn't get utilized very often. What people do tend to use the pages shelf for, though, is more of the storytelling, that animation that I said at the start that we weren't going to talk about, is it actually has a little play button that you can just click on and it will cycle through at its own leisure, which is kind of a cool storytelling feature if you're going to present this back to somebody else.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Sam. I love the fact that Pages brings your data to life and empowers your end user to be able to be in control of that. So if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, why are we asking that on a Tableau user group? If you've got interactivity on a dashboard and no one knows it's there, do they ever use it? Or in worst, do they use it and think your dashboard is failing and got a bug in it because it does something they don't expect it to do? So on this last tooltip, or the last quick 5 tips that Sam and I are going to share, is all about signposting. We would strongly encourage, especially in a business setting, if you've got interactivity on your dashboard, please make sure your end users know about it, so they can benefit from it, but also they can understand what their expected user journey is. And there's a few ways that we would say you could do that. The first one is just simple. Write some text at the top of your dashboard. Say there is click here to filter. Does what it says, everyone understands it, but remember that data to ink ratio, it can be quite consuming writing text. You could, within the text, use a common visual prompt to be able to say there's interactivity here. We all know that when text is underlined, it means there's a URL or a click. So you could be able to say, underline that you can do this to do something. However, all of that for us feels a bit cumbersome. What we would encourage you to do is use symbols and colors. So use a common symbol to be able to say, hey, team, there's interactivity here. And then color that symbol to be able to say the different types of interactivity. So in here, we've used a deep red for filter, a teal or a blue for hover actions, and a gray for a click for action. It's not rocket science. This isn't probably going to win you Iron Viz, but it will win you some hearts and minds with your end users in terms of allowing them to maximize their user journey. So Sam, I think now is the time. We always like to include in our Tableau Conference presentations a little bit of a let's show what could be done. So let's go beyond the quick tips and start to explore some of the advanced. So we are going to start with proportional brushing. Proportional brushing, we didn't invent. Proportional brushing was in, actually the first time I saw it was via Bethany Lyons at Tableau Conference Europe talk. I think it was about 2016. But proportional brushing is a great way of highlighting proportions of your data. So you'll see here, Sam has clicked on Australia and it's identified the proportion of your data on the right-hand side bar charts that relate to Australia. That's a great opportunity to keep the context. Sam, do you want to go into that a bit further though? Because I think there's a few more things you can do. I noticed a tooltip there that has got multiple geographies in it.
Yeah, so what we're doing here is we're using the map to drive our bar chart so we can see the proportions. So the selections from the map will drive the bar. But what we can do here is we can actually use the tooltip and we can select on the tooltip to select it, and that will also include everything into this bar chart here. So what's actually happening here is it's being run by sets. We have a single set that is taking the countries and we're adding those countries to that set. We're doing that via a set action. So whenever I click on a single country here, I'm adding the country to the set via set action, and that set has been placed on the color shelf on the bar chart. By placing it on the color shelf, what we're actually doing is we're splitting up, we're splitting it into 2 sections. The portion that is within the set, so the countries that are in the set, and then the proportion that is the countries that are not within the set. So we're keeping that top line of the profile of the sales in this instance, despite we're selecting different countries or different number of countries within it.
And you'll notice that we've used the visual prompt again. We've got the little symbol, so the red symbol to say, hey, there's stuff you can do here on that dashboard. It's just bringing through some of those quick tips. But Sam, when you did the proportional brushing, one of the limitations that I saw was the ordering all of a sudden remains within your kind of context. So it's still showing phones at the top. And yet for Australia, phones is not your top category or subcategory. What different ways are there to interact with the dashboard to overcome that limitation?
Absolutely. We always need to build in more solutions to really help our users dive into the data and get the answers that they're looking for. So here, what I've done, down the bottom, we can see we've got 3 different parameters. These 3 parameters will help us control this bar chart after we've made our selection on the map. So we're just going to Australia at the moment, and as you rightly said, phones, the proportion of or the sales for phones for Australia is not as big as the copiers here. So we can change the sort. So we can sort by the selected country's value. So if I were to select on that, what we're actually going to now sort by these pinky sort of bars that we have here, which represent Australia. So whereas phones was the top performing product or category worldwide, it's only the 4th
For Australia,
whereas it's actually the category worldwide. But this being proportional brushing, we might want to have a look at percentages. So we can actually sort by the percentage that the Australian sales make up of the world sales in each category. So here we get a sort of sort order, which isn't particularly apparent when we look at it at the absolute values of the total sales for each category. If we were to change this to 100% stacked bar, then you can now see the proportions lining up and it making a lot more sense. So now we can really see where Australia are starting to overperform for maybe their market or the worldwide, where they have high number of high proportion of the sales, depending, taking into account there's probably, I don't know, 150 different countries in this data set here. We can also show that by clicking another parameter, which will help highlight where we are performing better or worse than, in this instance, its own market. So we've added 3 different parameters to really interact with this bar chart based off the selection that we've made. So this is where proportional brushing comes into its own.
Thanks, Sam. So moving on from proportional brushing, we are going to hopefully end with the, oh my God, I didn't know you could do that in Tableau moment. So there's nothing like bigging up Sam, so you better perform when I say that.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
What you'll see here is sometimes you just want to show a single chart on a page. You don't want to overwhelm with, I know we say there should be a ratio of maybe 4 charts at most on a page and a 2x2 grid. Sometimes, you know what, you just need one. And this is this is a scatter plot that we showed at TC last year, where we're showing the ratio of prior year against current year sales. And anything below the bar or below the divider line in the middle is a decreasing sales year on year. And anything above the line is an increasing sales year on year. And we highlight that through color techniques and we highlight that through labeling. But the limitation of a single chart is that you've got no other context. What happens if you want to understand the trend? Normally, we'd be clicking on one of these points and it would be updating a filter to update a trend chart on the right-hand side. But in this instance, you've got no additional charts. Now, traditionally, when you hover over a dot, you would see a very bland tooltip. You might be able to get a Visin tooltip where you'll see a trend chart. But what about if you use map layers? What about if you really used tooltips to its fullest extent to not only brand it, but give some real functionality? So Sam, do you want to walk through how we've done that in terms of what you see on screen here?
Yeah, so I think this is one of those points of how many of you have actually seen a fully formed KPI tooltip? And not only have we got a fully formed KPI card, it's actually interactive, and I'll go into that in a second. So here we've got our standard tooltip, we've got a gradient background, we've got our ban, we've got the detail of exactly what that number is, how that's performing versus the prior year. We've also included how has its performance been across the last 12 months, and how is that compared to the previous 12 months. A whole lot of information stored in one single tooltip. And that's the point, is that sometimes with that single chart that's behind the scatter plot, sometimes you need to have a single chart to be able to see all the detail within it. So you need to save space. So this is why we're using a tooltip to create a KPI card. But like I said, it's interactive, and it's interactive through the options down the bottom here. So I could select copiers to understand how Canon as a manufacturer is performing against its own category. So now we've got an interactive Visin tooltip. I could select technology, and you can see how the technology category is performing across time. So you can make those comparisons and flick through and see, are the trends lining up? But when I'm making those selections, you'll see on the scatter plot that we're actually selecting all the marks that make up each of these different categories. So it's a very cool little feature that we've done here. And I'm going to, and I chuckle because it's not particularly easy. I'm going to try and explain how this works. So I'm just going to come out of here. So first of all, let's just start off with the scatter plot. The very basis of this, there's nothing too major going on in terms of the setup here. If we go into the tooltip here, all we've got is we've got a sheet. So we've inserted another sheet from the workbook. So that's our Visin tooltip. And then we've got some buttons that we've created that you're able to select and interact with. I'll come back to those in a second. But first of all, let's just talk about this Visin tooltip. So as Simon told, we are looking, if I just unhide the sheet so we don't lose it, and unhide all the sheets that are next to it. So we are using a map layer visualization that's creating that KPI card. It is as simple as that, well, it's not simple building a map layer visualization like this, but it's certainly possible to do. But what we're doing as part of this map layer is we've created 3 sets. We've created a category set, a manufacturer set, and a subcategory set. So it goes category, subcategory, manufacturer. Those were the labels that we were seeing on the tooltip. When we hovered on the tooltip, we were getting, let's go back into here, sorry. It's these categories here that we're interacting with. Now, when we interact with these buttons, what we're doing is we're actually firing off some set actions that are updating these 3 sets. So hopefully, if I go back to here, and I will hover on here a second, and then let me select Canon. So now we've selected Canon. If I go back to our Visin tooltip, we'll see that we've got Canon now, and you can see the sets to the right-hand side. So what we've done is we've updated the category that Canon plays in. So it only plays in the technology category. It actually plays in 2 subcategories, and then we'll have just the single selection for Canon here. So these 3 are acting as filters for this KPI card. If I were to interact with something different, you'll see how these will update. So if I go back into here, and maybe let's select the whole technology category. What we're doing here now is the 3 actions, dashboard actions, just on this sheet. So we've got 6 set actions. They're only pure. We've only got duplicates because it's going to run whether we hover on it or select on it. But each one of these sets updates the category set, the manufacturer set, or the subcategory set. The parameter action, that's just updating the title on the tooltip. So now I've selected the technology. We can see all technology, but now we can see that we have actually selected a number of different categories within each set. We no longer have one manufacturer selected. We've selected all the manufacturers that play within the technology category. And again, we've selected all the subcategories that play within the technology. So this is how it's essentially working. We're updating those sets. But the point that you might be missing is that how are we running that via the tooltip buttons? So those buttons at the bottom there. If I go back into here, and then into the tooltip, no, not that tooltip, let's into this tooltip. These options that we see here are actually dimensions that we've placed on the detail shelf. So we've got category, subcategory, and manufacturer. When we place them on the detail shelf, we have the option on a tooltip to allow selection by something that you've probably all seen. You might have left ticked as a default option, or you might have unchecked it thinking you don't know what it does, so let's just remove it. But if you have that selected and then have your show tooltips on hover, what that allows you to do is you can select these and fire off actions from clicking on those essentially buttons. So now I can select on these and it will fire off an action. And that's essentially the crux of this, is that we have some dimensions on the detail shelf that we're allowing the selection by category with. When we click on that, it fires off our set actions from the dashboard. Those set actions update 3 different sets that filter the KPI card so that we get the visualization we're looking for. So what we've done here is we've built a completely interactive viz in tooltip, which is something that I don't think people will have seen before. And if I've got just a quick time, I can just show you how easy the map player thing is. This is a background image. So maps, background image, and then it's one of these. And then if I slowly turn on all the different elements, you can say the title is just purely placed as a coordinate here. The big number is placed from here. We've got the year-on-year position was placed here. Some detail was there. You can see now that we've got the Gantt lines showing. We've got the current bar charts show across here. And then we've got some labeling for the bars. This is the crux of building this visualization. It's just purely each of those deals with a different element on the worksheet itself. Simon.
And thank you for not making me explain that like I did movably at TC last year. So I'm really pleased that you took that one on this year.
Thanks.
So in conclusion, we believe that interactivity can be your friend. It can democratize your user journeys, and it can be far more than Tableau's standard offering. But please always challenge yourself to ensure that interactivity adds value, and always ensure your users know interactivity exists. So on behalf of Sam and I, we'd like to thank you for listening to us. You'll be pleased to know that you didn't have to follow along today and work out what we've done. We've uploaded this workbook on both of our Tableau public profiles, so you can download it for yourself and you can reverse engineer it. If you wanted to reach out to us, those are our Twitter handles, Sam's YouTube channel and my blog post. And more importantly, just a massive thank you. You'll be pleased to know you don't have to give us Salesforce feedback because that's now closed. But thanks so much, Chindi, Annabelle, and for Sam for giving us the opportunity to present today.
Excellent.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam and Simon. That was just like amazing, especially at the end there. I think people are just going crazy right now. So you've just started something here and it's going to blow up. So thanks for that.
Awesome.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. We're going to continue on to the next speakers, but people, please feel free to keep on putting your questions in the chat. And Simon, if you don't mind just helping us kind of interact with the audience, whatever they need, that would be amazing. Thank you. All right, so on for our next people. Annabelle, do you want to share or should I just present my screen?
Please share so I don't mess up.
Okay, not a problem. 1 second here. I'm just gonna share my screen.
And I was very happy to attend Samuel and Simon's session now because I missed it during TC. I couldn't be your groupie like always.
Okay. All right, so next up, we have another amazing member of the community, Heidi. Heidi was an ambassador in 2022. And as far as like her experience with Tableau, right? She's like a lot of us where she got to touch Tableau in 2017 when she was a software developer. And she just always knew she wanted to work with that all the time. And so she took that passion and, wanted to get into it professionally. So she moved away from software development and she now works as a BA and BI and visual analytics consultant. Heidi shares her expertise with users globally. I'm sure you've seen a lot of her videos out there and seen a lot of her presentations. She speaks at user groups. She does a lot of presentations at the conferences. And you can check out her blog too to see her collection of, contributions there. She is a founder and co-lead of the Data Plus Women Initiative in Germany. And she makes it her mission to promote diversity in the community, which I think, that's an amazing thing to do because, again, the more diversity we have, the more ideas, the more skills, the more talents, the more improvement. It's just better for everyone. As a senior consultant at Woodmark Consulting, Heidi inspires people with her passion, and she wants to help build the company-wide culture, which I think is great because at this day and age, any business who wants to be competitive, you need to have some type of data strategy involved, and you need to have some kind of data culture to help your people understand the business better. So Heidi loves Tableau. We all know that, obviously, but the only thing she loves more than Tableau are alpacas. So that's one thing you should keep in mind there. And today, Heidi's going to be presenting tremendous Tableau tips to change the way we use Tableau. So I think this is going to be another session where we're going to get some more tips. And so combined with the tips from Simon and Samuel, I think we're going to leave here with a whole bunch of tipping and things to try out. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to pass it over to Heidi.
Do you want to introduce Tore as well? Because
I'm so sorry. Jesus.
He's my co-speaker.
I'm so sorry. I had them separate in my head. Sorry. So this is another joint speaker. My apologies, Tor. He's a Tableau Jedi ambassador and he's a Norway Tug leader. And he's an accredited Tableau trainer. So basically going around and helping people upskill and get up to speed. He works with InMatter Consulting. And he has worked with Tableau since version 7.0. So that's definitely a lot of iteration since he started. And I'm sure he's got to see a lot of the progression of the tool there. He's one of Europe's most merited trainers with over 3,200 participants in 15 countries with a score of 9 out of 10. So that's just amazing. And one thing about Tor is he has over 50 Tableau related shirts, sweaters, and caps. So definitely representing for Tableau and his swag all over the place. And of course, he is the second half of the talk, which Heidi and he are going to be given, which is titled Tremendous Tableau Tips to Change the Way We Use Tableau. So over to you both.
Thank you. I think I can't share my screen while you are still sharing.
Yep.
There we go. Amazing. Yeah, no worries. Okay. There we go. And I'll start my timer as well so I don't run over. I'll basically skip the intro because Chimney did an amazing job of that. So thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Heidi. I'm based in Germany. That's it, essentially. So let's get right to tipping. I've got a bunch of stuff for you today. I'll try to take it not too fast so that you can follow along. And the first one is also kind of on the topic of interactivity. Sometimes when your data is super big, it's easier to start on an empty dashboard. So you can see I currently have my state filter set to none because otherwise I have too many points and I want people to first select the one state they are actually interested in. In that way, I maybe should not have done a multi-value filter, but anyway, that's what we're dealing with. So I want to start on an empty dashboard. The thing is, when people open up an empty dashboard, they are usually quite confused. So I do want to offer a hint so that people can understand what they have to do. What did I do? I have a floating container here with just a text hint inside. And this OK button is a show hide button. So when I click OK, I hide the info text. But the thing is, the show hide button is still there, right? So I can still
show it again, but by now people understand what they have to do. And if I still have the hide button here, it gets in the way of my data. So I want that gone as well. And I can do that by simply dropping it into the same container that it hides. Because that way, if I click hide, it hides itself and it's gone and it can't come back. The thing is, when you test that, you have to remember to first bring it back because there's no way to bring it back otherwise. But nice way of showing a hint exactly once and then having it not be in your space anymore. One thing I've had a couple of clients ask is how can I calculate the exact difference to a certain rank of my data? So for example, here I'm looking at sales by customer, but it could also be sales numbers by the sales team. And they want to know if they are in the top 5, in the top 10, because maybe that's a bonus requirement at the end of the quarter or something like that. And we can do that. In my case, I've already created a parameter to give us a rank n. So we can say we want the rank, the top 3, top 5, top 10, or something like that. We'll stay with top 5. And now I can start building my, my calculations here. I'm going to use a set for that. So I want to go to customer name and create a set. And in here, I'm going to use all of the customers, but I'm only interested in the top n using the top n parameter that I created, looking at the sum of sales. Now, what this does is it gives me the top n people by sum of sales. And now I can calculate what the amount of sales is for the lowest member within the set. And how can I do that? I've typed it out so I don't forget because that happens. I want to know the sales of customer at rank n, whatever one that is. And I want to know the sum of sales for each customer, but only for the customers. Let's actually put this in an extra row. Only for the customers that are in the set. So I want to know, is a customer in the set? That is a logical statement by itself already. Then I'm interested in the sales, and I have to end this and add in the curly brackets. Now this just gives me the sum of sales for all of the customers in the set. And out of those, I want to know the minimum for the whole data set. And that's it. So this looks at the sales for all of the customers that are in the top n, and then gives me the lowest of them. So exactly at the rank that I'm interested in. Press OK. We can see this should now give us 14,474 for customer number 5. And now I can easily calculate the difference. So I can figure out what is the difference between the sum of my sales and the sum of customer at rank n. Get rid of the old fields. And now I can compare how far away am I from rank 5 or from rank 10 or from rank 3. So one possible way of doing that. I have another use case here where I'm looking at sales per subcategory across the different regions, and I want to be able to sort this. But the thing is, when I sort it now, it doesn't really look all that sorted because the sales are different in each region. So it may in parts be sorted. We can see the top 3 for East work out quite well, but after that, it's just all over the place. So I want to be able to have a smooth sorting within each region, but I can't do it that way. I have to do it another way. You can see that I have my sum of sales on text, and we are going to change this one to the rank. And we want to make this the rank across or compute using my subcategories. Now I can see what the sorting should be within. Well, that's not what I wanted. Within each region. But it doesn't help me all that much until I actually make this a discrete field and move it to rows. Now it looks a bit wild, but if I get rid of subcategory and drop it on label instead, we can now see that I have it beautifully sorted within each region, and I can even get rid of the rank here by hiding the header, and I can easily see what are my top categories or top subcategories within which region. Oftentimes, clients ask me to use their corporate colors when I design their dashboards, and that's fine if it's like a very discrete color like this one, like a pale blue, that works out well. But oftentimes it's a color like this one. And honestly, that's just a lot of color, and it makes it very strenuous on the eyes to consume this. So what I like to do instead is I like to make everything white and give it a border instead in the color of their choice. What you can see is that we are missing the bottom end of the border, and you can go to Format, opening up the Format menu on the left-hand side, go to Lines, Rows, and get rid of the axis ruler, and then we can beautifully see the bottom of the frame as well. If you feel that white is too much white or too little color, then you can also stay with the original color and simply dial down opacity to like 20% or even more. And you can see it still retains the color of the border, so you can easily still see the sharp edges. I also like to use the corporate color for highlighting. So let's say we are interested in highlighting a certain subcategory here. Let's actually create a subcategory set. There they are, sorry. Again, create set. Let's just choose, for example, copiers, press OK, and drop this on color. Then we can easily dial this back to full color and make everything that's not in the set white and everything that's in the set the corporate color, bringing this very much down. And then, of course, I want to be able to select maybe an element and make this be in the set. So for that, we can add on the worksheet, we can add a set action, change set values. Using this sheet, I want to be able to target my subcategory set and assign a value to the set. And maybe let's make this single select only. When I deselect, I want to keep all of my set values. Press OK. And now I'm able to highlight storage. But the thing is, then it is actually selected, which is annoying because it grays out everything else, and I don't want that. So what can I do? I can, and you may have seen this in other speed tipping sessions, I have created two fields that contain false and true respectively. Really, that's the only thing in there. And I can put them both on detail. Sorry, what just happened? I was a bit clicking too fast. And then I can add in another action, making this a filter action. And I want to be able just on this one sheet, so let's simply deselect all of the others. Just on this one sheet, I want to select something, and I want to use selected fields, and I want to filter from true to false, which of course doesn't make sense because false doesn't contain true, but it has the beautiful effect of I click something and it's not selected anymore. So that can easily be done. You can do the same thing in a dashboard, but the most important bit is that at the bottom, where you select a target sheet, you are not selecting a dashboard, you are selecting a single sheet. Otherwise, this one doesn't work. Found that out the hard way. Another way of reducing color is when you have multiple colors, and this is a tip I recently saw at Tableau Conference in the How to Do Cool Stuff in Tableau session that Ken and Kevin Flirted presented, and you can check that out on Salesforce Plus, just saying, is I want to reduce the color here because I have a lot of big bubbles that are very colorful, and of course I can, again, reduce the opacity, but then they are a bit difficult to spot. So what can I do? I can duplicate my axis, make this one, let's actually make this one first, make this a shape so that I just have the circles rather than the filled-in circles. Color them completely, and now make this a dual axis, and of course remember to synchronize, and we can hide the second header, and then you have beautifully framed shapes with the frame color corresponding to the shape color. Still have 8 minutes left, so we're good. This is one of my favorites. We are looking at rank of sales by customer, so something similar as we already looked at. And I'm interested in my home office customers. And we can see that they are in ranks 1, 4, and 17, etc. And I want to be able to filter on them. But the thing is, if I now filter on home office, suddenly they are ranked from within their position in home office. But that's not what I want. Now, why does this happen? This happens because I am using a dimension filter to just filter on the rows of home office, but table calculations get calculated after. So if I want to retain the ranking for all of the data, I have to use a table calculation filter. Now let's take a look at how I can do that. Let's go back to all. I want to use a function. Let's call this segment filter. I want to use a function called lookup. Now, what does lookup do? It returns the value in a target row relative to your current row. So we can look at another row, which is not necessarily what we want. We want to look at the segment in the same row. So we are just looking at our own segment. Now, Tableau will always complain if you do it this way, because table calculations can only be calculated on top of already aggregated values. So I'm using the minimum of the segment here. That works because I only have the one segment per customer. So be careful what kind of dimension you're using here. This calculation is valid, and I can now easily drop this in the filter, hit all, get rid of the old filter. Let's show this one. And if I now only filter on home office, you can see that this retains the original ranking. And one last one, so Tori, you may have a couple more minutes to go. This is looking at how can we zoom an axis. Now, you know, there's different opinions on whether we are allowed to shorten an axis or not. General rule of thumb, if you are looking at a bar chart, you are never, ever allowed to shorten your axis. But with line charts, there's different opinions out there. Some say, yes, I do want to be able to zoom in my axis. Others say, no, you always have to show the axis in full. And honestly, that's not a decision I want to take away from my consumers. Again, looking at interactivity that they can employ. So I want to give them the option to make that decision on their own. And we are going to use a parameter for that. We are going to create a parameter, and let's call this one zoom axis question mark, because question mark usually prompts people to give an answer themselves. And I want to make this a Boolean value. Now, rather than just leaving true and false, we're going to give this actionable aliases. So true means yes, zoom axis, and false means no, show in full. Now, happy with this one, let's actually show the parameter. For now, it doesn't do anything yet. First, we need to create a calculated field. And this one will be my 0 line. Now, depending on whether people want to zoom the axis, if they want to zoom, then I don't want any value. Sorry, missing the pen. If they want to zoom, if they don't want to zoom, sorry, I want 0 in here. Now, why is this important? I want to make my axis flexible, and I can do that by editing the axis and saying I don't want to include 0. Leave it on automatic because it should be able to scale naturally with the values that may change in your data source. but we don't necessarily want to include 0. So this would be what a zoomed in axis look like. But let's add the 0 line to detail, right click on the axis and add a reference line. Now we can use our 0 line to show up. I've made this very bold and orange just so that you can see what happens. The thing is, my 0 line currently contains the value null, nothing, so Tableau doesn't draw in a line. But if I select no, show in full, my 0 line takes on the value of 0, and Tableau has to stretch the axis to actually show the 0 value, and thus we are looking at the axis in full. Now I can easily edit my line, get rid of the line, and also get rid of the label. And now I'm easily able to zoom in or show the axis in full, depending on what my consumers want. And Tore, I think I just gave you 2 minutes extra for your time. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy Tore's tips.
Perfect, thank you. Now I'm going to share my screen as well. And hopefully do the correct one. You can see me there, hopefully. Yeah. So no more introductions. Everybody knows each other really good after all these great introductions by Chimdi before. So I'm going to do some more simple Levinsen tooltips. After the mic drops and everything that you just seen, this is more for people who don't want to be or spending the rest of this week to build some extra nice tooltips. So I'll show you what I'm going to do with my categories in here. You know all these categories from the famous Superstore, but I also have the subcategories split in here. I have the top 10 sales and the top 10 profit. And I would like to show all of this in the tooltip. And since most of you probably have seen these tooltips before, it's quite easy to go to tooltip. You can then insert whatever sheets you like. So let's just start with the subcategories like this. And we have Levinsen tooltip. Wow, it's not a mic drop, so that's fine. But I'm going to add some more stuff in here. So let's see what happens. I'm going to just do a couple of line shifts. I'm going to put in my next ones. I have the top 10 profit and I have the top 10 sales as well. More sheets and the sales. Let's see how this one looks like. So now it's a pretty long list of sheets in here or visits in the tooltip. So what I would like to do is to have the subcategory on top, and it's going to be a lot wider. And then I'm going to have the top 10 side by side instead of having them on top of each other. Go back to the tooltip. And by default, the width you see in here is 300, height is 300. So I'm going to adjust the first one to be 600, and then I'm going to put the next ones next to each other. So let's do this, do 600. And then the tip of getting those two side by side is very easy. You just click delete, so there's no line shift. You say, okay, I hover over. I have one, which is the subcategories, then I have two side by side below there. And if you would like to add some lines and stuff as well to make it a bit nicer, you can. I've created a simple sheet where we just have some lines. Go back to my Levinsen tooltip. I'm going to put this one in both before and after my visualizations. So I do sheets. I'm going to add in the line in here. That shouldn't be 300 pixels high. It's enough with 10. I also would like to put it in the end here. But if you go to insert, you go to sheets, and then you see I can't add the line. I already used it. Should I then duplicate the one that I already have in here? Or should I fool Tableau, because Tableau sometimes are a bit dumb? So basically just copy that same sheet that you already have added, and you can add it in the end as well. I'll say okay. I hover over. I forgot to make it 600, as you can see, so we can go in and change the length to be 600, and then you have lines in top and bottom. Okay, so you don't have the nice little background and all that cool stuff that you saw earlier, but it's a bit nicer way of looking at those viz in Tooltip as well. I'll move on, and there was somebody who asked before we started the session that Francois most likely will show us how now the announcement of Tableau finally is going to do spell check in Tableau. I've seen this, I think it's a year ago or something, one of the Flerich twins showed this, how you can do spell check if you are in the browser. I'm not in the browser, I'm in desktop, and I think that this is so great, but how can I fix this? Well, I have downloaded the app called Grammarly. You can download Grammarly, it's for free. When I click on the great one over here, you see that, well, it's all the way down here though. Let's see what happens. This is now trying to fix my spelling. So just pay attention, Francois, this is very simple. If I do accept, it's cleared, or at least Grammarly thinks so, because Grammarly and Tableau doesn't talk together. So what you need to do, you need to open up the window where you can edit something. You can then click on this one, accept, and you have done a spell check. Okay, I do the same for my caption. Suddenly there's 5 errors or 5 things that I can fix. I can say accept, 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 and I can say okay, and I have spell check in Tableau Desktop. So that's how easy it is. Unfortunately, you have to open up those windows to do it though. You don't see the spell check pop-ups. I think, well, hopefully if I just double checking in here, if I do this, sorry, I'm gonna do, did I have any calculated field in here? If I do edit now, do you see my calculation window?
Yes, we see the calculation or the tooltip or whatever, but we don't see like the Grammarly error, let's say. So maybe by sharing, it's not displaying. But we see the modification. When you accept, we see that it changed automatically.
Yeah, so I guess you just have to trust me then. But you see the pop-ups in Tableau, that's the most important thing. So I wasn't just cheating and changing, copy pasting actually, but I think I shared my entire window, but that's fine. Let's continue. I'm going to share one type of visualization and how we can build this one as well. This is a small multiple area chart looking at survival rate when it comes to different type of cancer. This one is this one was made some time ago by Klaus Schulte, also a known person in the data fam, visionary doctor, professor. I'm not sure what more he isn't, but I'm going to recreate this chart and show you some techniques of how to do these small multiple area charts. So I'm going to go to this build window. I'm just gonna do some filtering first. I'm gonna take away the all cancers. I'm just gonna look at the different type of cancers. I'm going to also, because not all the cancer types have data in all years, and also to make it then look a bit nicer in the view, I'm going to change to 1977. So I've done a couple of limitations on the view in here. Then I'm going to add in the years. I'm going to add in the survival rate, and I'm going to change this to an average. We see that the average rate is 37% in total over here, and then over here it's 51%. So it's going the right direction. But we're going to compare this to the mortality rate. We can do it the easy way, where we have cheated, where we have done the 1 minus survival rate, or you can do it the Heidi way, where you just double click in here and you can put in drag and drop inside of pills and do the 1 minus inside of this one. I can also show you, well, this didn't work because there's too many decimals and parentheses in here. But another quick tip is, if you do something inside of a calculation window and you know that there's something that maybe doesn't work in the calculation, or there's something in here, some parts of your visualization that is a bit strange, you can basically drag and drop also inside of, or not inside of, but from the calculation window into here. So you will basically get a ad hoc calculation. So I'm going to change this now to become a area chart, and you can also do the boring right-click dual axis, or you can just drag and drop. Since you would like to have it on the same axis, just drag it into the axis, and we have two different ones. Just make sure that measure name is on two different colors, and now we see the survival rate versus the mortality rate. And since I now did this ad hoc one, it doesn't say mortality rate as my original one, so I can drag and drop and replace it. Or one quite quick little tip as well, if you have an ad hoc calculation or you have one dimension or measure, you want to rename it. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. Do the couple of backslashes, call it mortality rate, click Shift Enter, and then you click Enter, and then I have modified my ad hoc calculation, and you will see that also on the tooltip when you hover over. But this is the total one. We're going to create a small multiple, and I'm going to do it for each and every cancer type. So I'm going to drag this one in detail. So it's going to look a bit worse before it looks good. There is a couple of calculated fields here, columns, which will go on columns, and rows that will go on rows. If you right click and say edit, in here, you'll see that this is a calculation that also are used if you do trellis charts and so on. Basically, it's the columns are calculating how many columns we need to based on the number of items in the dimension, in this case, cancer type. And then the same goes for rows. If I close this one, I'll drag columns to columns. I'll drag rows to rows, and it doesn't look very well. That's because we have now two table calculation, and we always have to remember the scope and direction of this. So I'm just going to edit, do specific dimensions, enter the cancer type, do the same thing over here to make sure that it actually calculates for each and every year for the cancer types. Now I'm just going to do some sorting as well, because this one, on the cancer type, because I haven't limited the sorting for my end user or for myself. So I'm going to sort by the survival rate from 2013 and see that some of these are better chances of survival than some that are all the way down on the right hand side. You can also add some labels in here, so we can always hover, but if we look at this one, it also has the name and the percentage on the label. There's plenty of ways of doing that, of course, but the one version, or the one that Klaus did back in the day, that he created a label for the different cancer types in here, and this is basically where it's going to be put. We're going to put this on the axis a bit over 1, since it goes to 100%. Put this on rows, right click and dual axis, and then I'm going to change the new one, the label, to, you could do a circle if you want, or you could do density. Looks a bit nicer, maybe, it depends. Put the cancer type on label, and then since this is on 125, we need to fix our axis. So it's fixed from 1 till 1 point, maybe 1.4. So we get some air around this one. We can add in the survival rate on label as well. That will now look a bit strange, especially since I put it on the area. I would like to put it on the label. I'll drag this one in again, put it on label, and then if you click on the label, I'm not sure if you have used this or clicked a lot on this one, but there's a lot of extra options if you click on this tiny little or 3 dots in here. So you have this dialog box that you probably have seen many times before, and you can do this also on the label. So maybe make this one a bit smaller for the percentage. Say OK, and need to do some alignment in here, and it almost looks as good as it should be. Just going to get rid of my my headers, because 0, 1, 2, 3 on rows and columns doesn't make any difference in here. And then it looks almost as good as we're expecting. There's still a few things that we could do to make sure that everything is looking exactly as expected, but I'm not going to spend time on that now, even though I got a couple of more minutes from you, Heidi. But I have a lot of extra small little tips that I would like to share. So I'll move on to some tiny Tableau tips. This is if you are on Twitter. I share a tiny Tableau tip every Wednesday, and I've done that for some months now. And it's really interesting to see that some tiny Tableau tip that I've used for ages to save some time when I build something or when I do something. Then I get feedback from people that I know that have been working and using Tableau for years and years, and they didn't know about those hidden gems that are in Tableau, and there's plenty of those. So I'll go through a couple of these for the last part of my session. First, I'm going to just build a dot map. I have some rat sightings from New York. I'm not sure why the Latin word for a brown rat is Rattus norvegicus. Not sure where they decided that name, but let's see what we have in here. If I double click on number of records, I have 114,000 rat sightings, and I'm going to New York in October. So now I would like to see where should I avoid going, basically. So I have the latitude, longitude. I have 1 dot. And I could, of course, put in either the borough, the agency, whatever dimension we have in here to make more that dot turn into many dots. But the easiest way to look at all your data points in Tableau is to go to Analysis and turn off the aggregate measure. If you do that, there's no aggregation anywhere, and we have 113,000 places in New York where there have been observed rats. For some strange reason, this nice little park over here, why are there no rats over there? And I don't know, but it's quite interesting. But when we look at this, there's a lot of dots, and this is something that a competitor of Tableau is not able to do, because we are now looking at 113,000 marks, which I think is 110,000 marks more than that other tool that's on the market. So yay, Tableau. If I now change from automatic on the marks card all the way down here, I'm going to reuse that density, and then you will see the darker the area, the more sightings of rats in New York. Maybe blue is not a nice color when we talk about something that not nice, so we can maybe do something like this. Or if you're looking at forest fires, then this one works as well. You see that you can change the intensity, you can change the opacity depending on your use case as well. Now we could have looked at the dates and looked at how it's changed over time using the pages as the guys did earlier, but I'm not going to do that for now. So this is what we call a dot map. Random, that was used earlier, so I'm not going to spend that one. They stole that one from me as well. If you haven't seen that random one, I'm just going to show you in here quickly. Random, just write it in, which is really funny. This is supported by Tableau, but it's not documented by Tableau. So if you just write random, Tableau recognize and understands it, but you won't go into your calculated field, look for a function, and see if you find something called random. There is some hidden gems in Tableau that people don't know about. And just a quick reminder, or when we looked at the tooltip, they allow selection by category, that when that's default on, all the dimensions you have in here will be underlined, as you see when I hover over, meaning that if I click on this customer, I can see how the customer is distributed over different months. This is then selecting all of July, for example. If you're building a table, tables are not boring, that we learned when we were in TC, but it's a bit frustrating that I can't read my titles, first class, same day, second, and so on. You could go entire view, but maybe that's a bit too much sometimes. So if you use the control control key and the arrows, you can increase the size as you like, instead of trying to find that exact sweet spot where the marker goes from a hand to this very tiny little, line in here. So use the control and keys in there. And since we have you here, Francois, could you answer me that after when it's your session? I have so many customers that when you are publishing something and they are a bit, getting older, they don't see as well. They don't know if you haven't been very good in saying that if you click on something or hover over, you see this extremely big plus sign here, or extremely small minus sign if you go over here. Could there be an option of having those always shown or always shown somewhere else? I'm just saying. If you're looking at the same subcategories, we have different measures in here, and then Tableau is adding the measure names, measure values. The problem now, if I also add a copy of this to label, just make sure that we are coloring the squares, we see that the sales goes from, I don't know, 8,000 to 330, 40,000, whilst discount goes from a very low number to 571. That's why these ones, you don't see any change in color, because the color legend goes from 11 to 336,000. If you don't know, if you hover over on the measure values pill on color, you can use separate legends. If you do that, then discount goes from 11 to 571. The sales goes from 8,000 to 336. You could also go individually and change the color for each and every one of these. But then again, be a bit careful if you suddenly have 15 measures and you have 15 colors, because that's not visual best practice. And how do you see when you can always hover over and see these borders? But it's not that easy visually necessarily to see, especially if you have even more detailed data in here. So on the color, you can always add a tiny, or not a tiny, but a thin little border. So it's even easier to see when it goes from copiers to envelopes and fasteners and so on. And Heidi, since I forgot to start my timer, because I was so happy that I could do 2 minutes extra, how much time do I have left? 5 minutes or something? Nobody knows. So I'll continue for a maximum of 5 minutes, or even less. I only have 3 more. When you're connecting to a data source, if you right click on any dimension or measure, you can right click and click describe. You will then get an overview of what is this field, and you can even load in the domain, and you can see the values that you have in here. So for a dimension, a measure looks like this. For a dimension, it will look like this, and you will see the domain in here. So it's a nice way of getting to understand your data. If you also have done calculated fields, like I have over here, if I right click on it and say describe, and if you are good, you don't have time to do that, Heidi, I know, when you're doing calculated fields in a speed tipping thing, but add these backslashes, add some comments. You will also see that when you describe a field like this. And even better, if you are creating a calculated field like this, I have added a comment. And then I have, the other way around, actually. I'm going to do this edit on this one. This one is doing a nested calculation, or it's using another calculation. And then on the right-hand side, if you have all those functions available, you will see your calculation and you will see your comment. So that's a nice way of remembering what you have done before or earlier. And if you created a nice little chart like this, you can press Control E, and then you will get a sheet description. So a description of the entire sheet with all the data sets, the columns, the rows, and so on. And you can copy this and put it into your documentation. And if you're a consultant, you can do that, and you can say you spent 5 hours, but the only thing you do is Control E, and then you copy. Finally, there is this category, subcategory, and you would like to color this on category. You drag in color, you get one color for furniture, one for office supplies, and so on. But I also like to color it by subcategory. So if you drag subcategory into color, you get the color for subcategory, but not the category anymore, because you can't drag two different measures into color. Or can you? Well, you can, because if you drag category first, you drag subcategory to detail, then you can just change the label, or not the label, the icon over here to color. Then we have furniture is blue, and the subcategories from dark to light blue, like this. And if I would like to now create a level of detail calculation, what is the sum of all furniture or all office supplies, and we have forgotten the syntax of creating a level of detail calculation. A couple of versions ago, you drag sales, holding control, drop it on top of category, you get the new calculated field, which is a level of detail calculation already made, and you don't have to worry about the curly brackets and figuring out if it's control or shift or whatever to put in the end of the curly brackets. Then I can put this in here, or I can put it over here and do it discrete like this. Finally, you see that I have two superstores in here. So I have some data, some visits that I use this one, some have used this one. So if I go back to my, for example, this Levinsen tooltip, it's using this one. But I have now, I'm going to get rid of this sample superstore. So I'm going to right click on this, replace my data source. So this sample superstore will now become sample superstore 2. It tells me that something is going to fail because I have a filter on state province that doesn't exist anymore. Now in the state sample superstore 2, it's called state. So what do? Do we drag this one in and replace it, or we just right click, replace the reference, the state province that doesn't exist is replaced by state. I have no more red flags. I can close that sample superstore and I only have one superstore data source. So that was it. Thank you. Hopefully you learned something. I haven't been able to look at the Q&As and DMs, so I'll look at those and answer if there's any questions when Francois is now introducing the spell check or whatever it was.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks so much, sir. That's amazing. Next, we're going to go in a bit of a different direction here. Francois is going to be having some product discussions with us. Actually, let me share my screen here. Do you mind stop sharing, Tor?
Let me stop sharing. Sorry. There you go.
Oh, so actually, you know what? Why don't you just go ahead? Basically, Francois is going to talk a little bit about the product with us. He essentially is involved in creating, the strategy for the product with the main clients of Tableau and everyone else there. I'll let him do the introduction and everyone just, get excited because I'm sure we're about to see some cool stuff incoming.
Yeah, so guys, this is going to be a bit of a lightning session. I work as the field CTO for Tableau here in EMEA. So I kind of divide my time between Tech Alliance partners like Snowflake and Databricks and Google and AWS. And like the other half of the time is acting as a voice of product into customers. So that's kind of where I am. And I thought the way I'd spend the next 40 minutes is doing a really quick review of the key announcements from TC, and then try and squeeze in a few more detailed demos that didn't make the cut. So most of the demos I'll be showing you today will be like pre-release. So, don't make buying decisions based on them. All the fine print applies. I'm also going to, there was a lot of interest in some of the augmented experiences and the AI assisted experiences. And I just want to spend a bit of time talking about how you should curate your data sources and think about preparing data so that we're kind of ready for those sort of experiences and you'll get maximum value out of them. So hopefully that is useful to all of you. I'm going to skip through this. Some fine print, make decisions based on products that are available rather than things that are in roadmap, because roadmap may change. Right, so my favorite moment at TC was this talk that Libby Hickey from John Lewis Partnership gave. She spoke about this idea of ideas from anywhere. And she specifically had this analogy of Netflix versus TikTok. So she spoke about this idea of we need to create trusted channels where people can get stuff pushed to them based on their interests. And then we also need to enable people to go and do crazy things some gems will come out of that, and we'll standardize on those, and those will become the control charts of tomorrow. So I thought this is really good because it kind of aligns with the way that I think we think about product. Specifically, we think that like in most businesses, basically there's an untapped need where people are really eager to solve the most complex challenges. And also we think that if you don't solve those problems, then people like become less motivated and they aren't inspired about the impact of their work. So data gives meaning to work is kind of the way we think about it. And so like this was fairly late in the devs on stage, but we made a few announcements about investments in Tableau Public because we recognize that investing in the analyst experience is the way that we drive scale in organizations. And there were two things that I think are specific that I just wanted to draw out because there were some announcements afterwards that kind of overshadowed these and people kind of forgot about these. We said that we've already been investing heavily in search on Tableau Public to help you find content more easily. I hope you've already seen the impact of that. It used to be awful. It used to be terrible and difficult to find content. Now it's pretty good. It'll become even better with the ability to, for example, filter only for content that you can download, which is what I always do because I want to look at the underlying data and what have you. It'll also become better when we add activity feeds. So we were told that people were super depressed that you couldn't follow your network, and now it'll become much easier to see what their activity is. We also, and this is the first time we've started doing this, is we've started to preview features on Tableau Public before they even get into Tableau Cloud or Tableau Server. So the free product gets the features first when it's like an analyst experience, because it's an easy way for us to get feedback. So I'm going to go through new viz types, but like I just want you to kind of note that is I think that's a significant change. However, just like investing only in the analyst experience isn't going to get us to kind of where we need to be, because what we find that in most organizations, it's only about 30% of people that are able to question KPIs, communicate with data, find internal collaborators that they can work with. So there is this, on the one hand, there's this kind of adoption problem. On the other hand, there's this problem here about the fact that everyone has too much data. It's hard to join the dots. It's hard to harmonize identities. There's not a lot of trust. And then finally, a lot of the times you put like an amazing dashboard out there, but it doesn't necessarily drive action. So it becomes kind of shelfware. So there needs to be a lot of new experiences which address the 70% of people who are kind of not data-driven today, because there's this huge gap between what people say they want to do and what actually happens. And so this is the place where we're most excited about the impact of kind of new experiences, like, for example, large language models, NLG, and what have you. So we made this announcement at Tableau Conference about Tableau GPT, which is essentially integration between Tableau and large language models. And I think it's quite interesting because a lot of the market has been, I mean, this has kind of become really super hyped. A lot of the market's been talking about using this to generate code and to automate the generation of visitors and what have you. And for example, to automate data prep. And we will be investing in those experiences to like drive efficiency for analysts. But where we think this will have the most impact is not in making it easier to create existing experiences, but in enabling like the 70% to access data where they couldn't before. Because the thing is, if we give them contextual insights and we push data to them, then we will create breadcrumbs back to the charts and the data sources that you've prepared. So we will generate more engagement. And so that's why we focused on this thing that we call Tableau Pulse. And so Tableau Pulse is designed to be a newsfeed-like experience, where the 70% of people need to have contextual relevant insights pushed to them, and then they use these as a starting point to get into the kind of more detailed charts and what have you. So for example, this person subscribing some metrics, they see an alert that pops up for appliance sales. It's higher than normal. They need to have NLG. Firstly, they need to understand where that comes from so that they have some trust. So they need to understand the lineage. But then they also need to use large language models to, for example, generate suggested follow-up questions. In this case, at Tableau Conference, we showed this example of, I've identified that air fryers have had a spike in sales. Well, what else should I know about air fryers? And this is kind of the workflow that we'll be enabling to get that other 70% on that path to becoming data rock stars. Because the thing is, you've got to start somewhere, and this is an amazing way of starting to drive curiosity with data. Finally, once they've found something that's really interesting, they need to be able to share that with other people, so that they also drag them into the platform. Whenever there's an insight shared, it should generate links back into Tableau, but it should also enable you to follow up without ever leaving that collaboration channel. So regardless of whether it's Slack or email or Teams, it needs to be driving engagement to the data that you maintain. So that's kind of the high-level concept. That's the 70%. And here's the 50,000-foot view of kind of how we get from here to there and how we're approaching this problem. So we're leveraging new technologies like generative AI, augmented reality, and we're thinking about how they can enable these brand new user experiences. So that's kind of this top layer here. But there's some things that, for example, large language models are good at and some things that they're not good at. So LLMs can understand sentiment. They can write great narratives. They can write code. They're really good at sifting through large amounts of document-based data. But they're not good at, for example, they can hallucinate. They can actually fabricate results with high confidence. They're not good at deterministic math. They're not good at understanding live, constantly changing data. They're not good at actually handling things like level of detail issues. And that's kind of our core technology. So that's what VizQL is a semantic layer that enables all that stuff to happen. So what we've done is we've taken technology that we already have with Tableau and VizQL, and we're taking all of the investment in connectivity with modern data platforms like Snowflake and what have you, and we're building a new metrics layer so that we can deliver that source of truth to all of those augmented experiences. And then we also extend work that we've done with experiences like Explain Data and Data Change Radar, and we deliver automatic detection of patterns and changes in metrics. And that's kind of how this all works. So the most important thing here is, if we're doing all of this stuff where we are generating signals, the semantic layer becomes even more important than it has been historically. And this is the kind of second part. So I'm going to touch on shared dimension. I'm going to demo that. But there's a bunch of other things that are kind of important in this space. Firstly, we'll be moving metrics. Today, metrics are defined at the workbook level. We'll be moving metrics up to the published data source level, and we'll be making them much richer. So in order for these experiences to work, you need to have single source of truth. You need to have well-defined taxonomies for your metrics. You need to understand how I can segment the data and break it down by date ranges. We'll be helping you. So not at day one, but after GA, we'll be bringing Tableau GPT to look at your data sources and suggest metrics for you. So that'll be the way that'll scale and kind of grow across your organization. So when you're curating your data sources, you will be curating data, creating vizzes, and also publishing metrics. And those are all going to link towards this knowledge graph that enables people to find your content faster. So that's metrics. But we've got kind of big ideas for these. These essentially open up the published data sources that you have for exposure through a number of experiences. So you'll see them in email, you'll see them popping up in collaboration channels and mobile. Eventually, you'll be able to drag these these kind of metric cards into your dashboards, and that'll become like a new band type experience. And then you can, and then not at GA but post GA, you'll be able to kind of facet from the metrics down to the charts that you generate. So that's kind of the way that we drive standardization. And then people have familiar interfaces that are kind of their starting off points for exploring your data. So hopefully that kind of explains where that's going to fit in. I want to spend a little bit of time on demo on this, because I think this is really important. And so we've taken on board what you've said about the way relationships work. Today, relationships are quite good at doing fairly complex models, but if you have like a shared dimension, and you have two base fact tables, you can't manifest those in relationships today. So I've pulled together an example of a data model which is not particularly friendly for relationships today. I actually pulled this data source off Rebrickable because I'm always on the lookout for like a slightly gnarly schema. Here's the challenge. We have two fact tables. The one fact table contains Lego parts, and parts are related to sets via inventories. And then we have another fact table which contains minifigures. And you can see that minifigures are related to sets via inventories. But I should really, be able to explore these at the same time. It really doesn't make sense for me not to be able to model those two fact tables because they are related to the same thing. So I want to show you how we do that in this new experience that we'll be launching, which is shared dimensions. So again, this is going to be later this year. You'll see that some of the UI looks a bit janky because we're working on, here we go, I'm going to sign into Snowflake. So I'm doing this all on live data. This could be Snowflake or Databricks or what have you, any data source that we support. It could be an extract. For demo, I don't like to wait around while CSV files load. So that's why I'm using a live data source. Okay, so this is my starter, and I'll show you what the data source looks like before we add a second fact table. By the way, I think I could model this with the existing functionality. So some of this may seem a bit arbitrary, but what I have is I've got my parts fact table, and I would like to add an additional fact table for minifigures. So you can see that my parts are related to inventories. So a part is part of an inventory which belongs to a set, but it's also, each part can also have a color. So I can have a red brick or a black brick. And then a part can also be in a part category. So far, so good. I can ask questions around, using existing functionality we have. I mean, so far, nothing's really changed. I can find a list of sets, and I can, for example, ask questions around how many, let's filter on one of the sets so it doesn't go all crazy. Let's do this in a second. Sorry, I have a mic in the way of, try. Are we doing here? Are we doing this? Sorry, this is beta code, so I'm gonna see if I can get this to work. Oh, card match. Oh, here we go. Fine. Fine. We'll take something that's got a few parts in. We'll take. This is a minifig hack. Sorry about this. I should have chosen something a little bit better. Batman versus the Joker. That's going to be a set that's going to have like more than one part. So let's have a look. If I look at the parts that are in that set, I can see that I have, all of these parts, and I can even, for example, look at the part quantity. So that's all existing functionality. We're harmonizing level of detail in a vertical hierarchy, if that makes sense. I'm going to clear that down because this is all not the most beautiful viz I've ever built. Let's pull in minifigures. Now you'll see in the new functionality, you can add something as a child table or as a union or as a base table, depending on where it lands. We'll probably optimize this UI a bit. You can see it gives you an alert now because it says one of the tables in the graph is an island. I'm going to join that in. So I'm going to pull in inventory minifigs, which is my many-to-many table. So this is joined on figure number, and then I'm going to join that to this existing inventories table. So, creating like relational modeling is complex, but I hope you agree that we've made this not overly complex. I mean, it's the main thing is it should be incremental. You should be able to take an existing model and easily adapt it. So, for example, I might now want to be able to ask a cross-functional question. I might want to say for each set, what is the number of minifigures and the number of parts? So we're doing we've got a bunch of minifigures that are these standalone keyringy type junk handouts that come with magazines, so I can exclude those, and then I can see all the other stuff should start to look sensible. Hopefully this works. Right. Okay. So we've kind of got what we expect, which is a few. Let's sort by minifigures. We should see like the big sets have got more minifigures. Like Ultimate Battle for Chima has got a ton of minifigures and what have you. So you kind of get the idea. That's multi-dimensional modeling. We've tried to make it easy. We've tried to make it incremental. We expect you should be able to extend your existing models you've created using relationships. And like all things, please, dear God, stop using custom SQL. Please stop using joins. It's just going to make your life difficult. If joins make it impossible for us to resolve level of detail issues automatically, so all of these augmented experiences will just produce kind of garbage results because you'll have measure multiplication and what have you. So adopt relationships. It's the only way forwards. Okay. There you go. Shared dimensions. You can do things today to curate data sources so that they are suitable for augmented experiences. And I've mentioned this. Please don't embed like strategic data sources inside workbooks because they're not reusable. You end up with metric drift and what have you. Try and store them as a published data source so that you have the single source of truth. Let's not be so dependent on extracts. If we have a modern cloud data platform, let's use that so that we can store data at a better level of granularity. So that's why I'm like using a Snowflake or Databricks or BigQuery or what have you. Enrich the catalog with metadata. So we have data management inside Tableau so that you can, for example, if you have descriptions and things in an external catalog, you can use the API to tag things. Then you'll get much more value when you're searching for content and what have you. Granular wide data sources give more insights. And that's kind of what I wanted to show is what does a good data source look like. And what I did for this, I looked on, it turns out on Tableau Public, there's a ton of data sources on clinical trials and like really good quality open data. And I found this by Ellen Blackburn. And it's a perfect data source to speak about this topic because it's granular. It's got one row per clinical trial, but it's also quite wide. It's got a ton of dimensions about condition and what have you. So over aggregated data sources produce weak results with augmented experiences, whereas this one produces really good results. And I just wanted to show you kind of what it feels like. So all I've done is taken that data source, I've downloaded it. I've actually stripped the data out using prep and slung it into Snowflake because I like to test everything with live query. If it only works on an extract, then as far as I'm concerned, it's not really a super useful feature. So here's an interesting problem. This talk about the 4x4 charts. Well, sorry, 4 charts on a page. This has got like probably too much information. So for most business users, there's too much to see here. So that's okay. You can quickly improve that by adding like a data story, which will highlight specific things you should zoom in on. So here's an interesting data point. Research into genital disorders has an interesting spike. And I can't see that when I look at the viz. So the signal's kind of lost in the noise because there's a little bit too much information on this page. But because my AI tells me to click on that, I click on it. The viz is reauthored according to that perspective, and I've kind of got to an insight quite fast. So we can use these experiences to make existing vizzes kind of richer. Here's another point. We've moved explain data into this data guide pane. You'll see later on the data guide pane is going to become much richer. But because this data set is very wide and granular, Tableau can now like issue these ad hoc queries down to Snowflake and say, okay, well, let's brute force extreme values out and let's look for correlations. I think that's why you have a modern data platform, is so that you can store data in a much more granular format so that you can enable self-service. So in this case, it comes up with really good quality insights. The reason that there's this huge spike is because there's research into erectile dysfunction, and it's got a huge number of enrollments. It offers to show me the difference between what happens if I include versus exclude that. So your end users can get some like advanced concepts without having to know a ton of math. They can understand the impact of excluding that. That's not enough. Clearly, even when I exclude that, there's still a spike. And then explain data tells me that the spike is because there's also an interesting correlation between research phase, more research projects in this year at phase 3 and 4, where there would be more enrollments because we're later in the trial. So those things, granular data really is what we eat up. And then finally, the other thing I did with this was I just published the data source. Because when you publish a data source, you are building a knowledge graph. So I have clinical trials history here. It's reasonably well curated. So I've put like field descriptions and everything against it. I can see all the connected workbooks. So when I now look in recommendations, if someone else has created a workbook against the data source that I look at, it's going to pop up. And you can see how all of these experiences flow through into Tableau Pulse and what have you. Okay, 17 minutes left, and I'm going to crack on with a few more bits and pieces. So I hope that makes sense. There are things you can do today to make your data sources better, improve experience today, and then when those augmented experiences get launched, your users will just kind of get awesome experiences. I'm going to touch on Customer Data Cloud. I'm not going to demo it because we're running low on time. The problem we're trying to solve here is if you've built a data culture, often you end up with a problem where your users are saying, I need X, Y, and Z data, but it's really hard to join the dots. It's really hard to curate it. I'm actually struggling with data supply. And the two specific things that we see a problem with are, one, harmonizing taxonomy. So if I have lots and lots of data sources from lots of business systems, they won't have a single object model. So it's going to be hard to query across systems. The second thing is each system may have different identifiers for customers or products or accounts or what have you. So joining the dots when I'm at viz time is really hard for business users if they have to do those two things. So that's kind of the job of Data Cloud. Data Cloud's job is, firstly, we map any data sources that you connect into Data Cloud, whether you connect them via live table or via ingest, we map them to a well-understood object model. We call this the Customer 360 data model. And then we also harmonize identities. So we resolve for single customer identifier and pull that into a single customer graph. And the reason this is interesting for analytics is we've taken the hyperquery engine that sits inside Tableau. This is the way that we analyze extracts. This is our columnar data engine that runs on desktop. Whenever you load an extract, that's what you use. We've taken Hyper and rewritten that as a scale-out platform and deployed that inside Salesforce Customer Data Cloud. So now when you live query Customer Data Cloud data, you'll see that you get this extract-like performance because all of the Hyper queries are executed locally against that knowledge graph. So if that's something that is a challenge, we'd love to speak to you and kind of show you that on like a really large data set and show you how we've delivered this extract-like experience on really massive data sets with huge numbers of data points. Moving on, analyst experiences. The first thing I'd just like to touch on is new viz types. Now, I know we've demoed Sankey charts, but I think one of the things that's really interesting about this is, firstly, we launched it on Tableau Public, made it available first, got feedback there. But secondly, we've created new viz types without breaking our fundamental founding design principles. So we've always said, visualization needs to be incremental, expressive, unified, direct. You shouldn't have a chart wizard where you select the chart type and then select dimensions and measures. You should be able to do things through drag and drop rather than having to have a static viz. So what I've done is I've pulled together, I just want to show you what that means and how these new viz types are going to work. So I love the web edit functionality in Tableau Public, by the way, because if I'm browsing someone else's great content, it's just sped up things so much. If I want to look at what the data looks like underneath their viz or get a tip for how they did something, I don't have to download it anymore. I just web edit. And the Sankey chart functionality is web edit only. So if you want to try it out, you're going to have to kind of get used to clicking that pencil button. When you select one of these custom viz types, what we're actually going to do is we're going to drop in a bunch of new marks cards over here. So in this case, this data set contains information about loyalty tiers and, all the usual stuff we'd expect. So I have regions. This is my Superstore database and, product categories. But you can see what I'm doing is I'm not doing anything that feels unfamiliar. I'm dragging and dropping stuff onto the viz, and the viz is adapting as I change the way that these things are ranked, and as I change the order, things modify. So all of this feels more like an exploration tool. And historically, Sankeys have been something which have been like wizardry, where you never touch the damn thing because it'll break. But now you can drag and drop the order of these things. You can really explore flow because you have your familiar drag and drop interface. So I think they did a great job about this. And what's going to be really exciting is as we add more viz types, we're going to take the same approach. We're going to keep on extending the marks cards. We'll have specific marks for specific viz types. You'll have that same drag and drop Tableau experience where you can just explore data and it kind of feels organic and beautiful. Cool. Some more like cool things. We added support for new image types. We finally added address geocoding. We've always been able to geocode down to the postcode. Now we can do down. So this will be coming out later this year. We can geocode it down to the the individual address. We spoke about a number of prep enhancements that are just like real quality of life things. So this makes it a lot easier. When I've downloaded a data source and I want to like strip out a few header rows and what have you, now I can do that. I can also intelligently scan for duplicates and manage those. And then we added spatial join functionality into prep. So this is quite interesting. Spatial joins are so damn computationally expensive that sometimes this is really something you want to do in advance if you want to have highly performant visitors. So I'm all for doing all queries live and what have you, but spatial is probably the one exception where sometimes pre-materializing these or using a spatial join as a filter to just bring in the data points you care about is like a really good optimization. So that's kind of why that's there. We also increased the connectivity. So now all of the data connectors that are published on Exchange are now also available in Tableau Prep. And then the final thing in this analytics experience thing is we showed something which is a little bit further out. But I mentioned generative AI to give you like easier ways of building content. And as for example, a replacement for the existing search experience and the existing Ask Data experience. So we showed this. This is a thing called Analytical Assistant. You'll see that we're going to be investing heavily in the data guide pane. So this is where you see outliers and you see the explain data explanations today. This will be where you'll see all of these additional things. And there'll be like a good on-ramp to quickly build new visitors and ask new questions from existing data. So that's the analyst experiences. And I think there's quite a lot there. Developer experience is my last section. We've one of the things in order to get to the 70%, one of the things that's really important is our viz. If someone has to swivel chair to get to a viz, it just becomes shelfware often. Whereas if you embed something in someone's application or their web experience or what have you, they tend to use it a lot more. And also then you have access to functionality like using the application context to filter the viz. And that's really powerful because for a user, when they arrive in a viz and it's been magically sorted by the application to just show what they are working on at that point in time, that changes the way people work with data. So we've invested in that. We rewrote the embedding API to make it a lot more developer friendly. We also improved the way you authenticate between your application and the embedded viz. So now with connected apps, we can use Tableau Cloud. You can authenticate down to just the project level. You don't have to use trusted tickets and things. And then we added a few additional functions. So now you can embed web authoring in these embedded experiences. So we have some customers that want to like run an external data marketplace. They can use that. But we're not finished. We still saw that customers were finding it kind of hard to build visitors. So we launched this, which is the embedding playground. It's actually a really good way. For me, it's a good way of getting on top of what the current functionality is of the embedding API. So, for example, I can change the display and what have you in code, but I can also like do crazy things. Like I can hack the context menu in Tableau. So, and the way this works is you essentially using this left-hand pane to browse the API, you just drag in a widget. And then it gives you all the documentations and what have you. So in this case, I'm going to call this Francois was here. And I'm going to switch to my preview. And, without writing any code, I've hacked the context menu and I can then go and link actions off of that and what have you. So we think this is a really good way for people to you can quickly develop your code in this grid view and then just paste it into your application. We think it's going to be a much easier way of bringing insights to wherever your customers are working. So that's cool. Final thing, and this was really exciting actually, was VizQL Data Service. This is the way we build internal apps today. So VizQL is Tableau. It's like the core IP of the product. It's this abstraction language that sits between the data source and the question being asked. So it's really powerful that we've announced that we're going to be taking VizQL and exposing this to you. So if you if someone wants to build an application on top of Tableau that isn't using our graphs and it's just using the semantic layer to query, they can do that. They can, it's very simple to query VizQL. It's very simple when you change the context and, for example, you add subcategory and you drill down. It's very simple. All of the level of detail and the metrics and things that we bake into the data source just get exposed through this interface. So again, another reason to move away from embedded data sources to published data sources and to really think about how you curate data, because that unlocks all of these additional experiences as well. And then finally, Matthew stood up and then he stuck his finger in the air, and then everyone kind of forgotten about all the rest of the stuff that we went through during the rest of the keynote. Because I think the thing that people left speaking about was this idea of using or augmented reality to deliver more immersive viz experiences, so that when I'm presenting data and doing data storytelling in a webinar, for example, how can I really make the data make an impact? So he showed this thing that we call Tableau gestures, and essentially, I think this is this kind of. I think the reason people are quite excited is this potentially gives everyone their Hans Rosling moment. It's going to be a really good way of driving follow-up discussion for a dashboard and having more people around the table discussing data and really kind of getting passionate about those questions that we already are passionate about. So I'm quite excited about this. I think this has really driven a lot of interest. This is not something which will be released tomorrow. We have a lot of problems to work through. We have to work through how the hell we get around those data sources with hundreds of measures and dimensions. How do we make it practical? Perhaps the starting point is an existing viz, and then you are interacting with that and then adding additional things to that. For me, the first thing I do with any viz is I create a small multiple by breaking up the line chart to see how it works. So those are the sort of things that you want to be able to do interactively in real time. And I think this was the icing on the cake for me. A really good final thing, which to a certain extent made everyone forget about all the rest of the announcements, but was a really good talking point. So I'm going to leave you now. I've got 5 minutes on the clock, so I'm a little bit ahead of time. 3 things to focus on. We're going to keep on investing in data culture and community. We're going to keep on investing in helping you to deliver a complete and trusted view of data. That's how we're going to deliver better tools to curate data. And then finally, we're going to get laser focused on business user engagement. And with investments in embedding and what have you, we'll make sure that you can integrate more tightly with workflow and bring Tableau closer to all your business applications. And that's it. Really, thank you everyone for all of your time today. I'm going to pass back to Annabelle.
Thank you very much, Francois. Do you want to share the slide one last time, Shimdi, and closing today?
Sure. 1 moment, I'll get you going.
Yeah. So, Francois, we have some question.
Sure.
Annabelle asked if she can have the gesture capability for a meeting with a boss. That will be nice.
Yeah, and that's exactly the idea. It's so we have some people who are passionate with data, and it should be a tool to again, it's about driving engagement. It should be a tool that gets more people immersed in it, and it drives them back towards the platform and the experiences that you've really created. So again, all of these things they're not replacing the work you've done. They are driving more eyeballs towards the work you've done. So you should see the consumption of all your existing data assets just kind of go up as these get launched. Yeah.
Indeed. So, Shimdi, do you want to?
So am I closing or you're closing?
No, you are closing.
Okay, awesome. So basically, we've got some amazing speakers who we've seen today. We get these speaking, engagements going once a month. If you have something that you want to share with us, you can definitely apply to speak over here. And we'll be happy to schedule you in and get you talking to a group over here. And then there's another favor we'd like to ask of you. Essentially, Tableau has reached out to us to connect with you to sort of get a lot of feedback from you, which will allow you to actually give inputs into the product. And so essentially, we encourage you to check out these 2 QR codes so that you can actually go to the links here where you'll be able to share about your experience at the features from TC, just kind of give your ideas and thoughts on what you saw there, and maybe some things that may not have been considered. Whatever it is you want to put out there, definitely there's an opportunity for that. And then essentially on the right-hand side, you can actually then sign up to get notifications of opportunities to kind of get involved with, like, you know, the research and things like that. So get into that if you really want to influence Tableau, because again, you know, it's all about the people here. And so as usual, we have this once a month. Our next one is in June. So basically last Thursday of every month. And register at this link over here. And as always, we're going to have the videos recorded, so you can always check back in. We recommend you join this group. Videos are there, past events, future events, and everything else you need to know about that. So thank you today. And with that, we will close out this session. And I hope that you all have a wonderful evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you are.
Thank you. Bye-bye.